What happens when one of the greatest actors of our time sits down for what should have been a friendly chat, only to be met with arrogance, provocation, and a stunning lack of respect? In just 33 seconds, one careless question turned a light-hearted interview into a national controversy. By the end, Anthony Hopkins would walk off the set of Loose Women, leaving Denise Welch to face the silence she'd created. The studio that afternoon was bright and humming with its usual midday energy. Loose Women was live, the crowd buzzing. Hopkins entered to polite applause, a man of composure, grace, and quiet command. He was there to promote his new psychological thriller, a passion project years in the making. At the panel sat Denise Welch, Nadia Sawalha, Kay Adams, and Janet Streetporter. They smiled as Hopkins took his seat, adjusting his microphone with the calm ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. "Welcome to Loose Women, Mr. Hopkins," Denise said. That familiar daytime TV grin stretched across her face. "We're absolutely thrilled to have you." "Thank you," Hopkins replied softly. "It's nice to be here." But Denise leaned forward, already loading the first volley. "Now, before we talk about your film," she said, "I think everyone watching wants to know, who's the most difficult person you've ever worked with?" The audience chuckled. Hopkins blinked, surprised by the tone. "Well," he said slowly, "that's quite a question to start with. I'd say everyone I've worked with has been professional. Filmmaking is collaboration. You learn something from everyone." But Denise wasn't satisfied. She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, come on. You can tell us. We've all heard the stories. Was it this person? That one?" She rattled off famous names like she was reading from a gossip column. Nadia shifted uncomfortably. Kay looked down at her notes. Janet raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. Hopkins remained composed. "I don't think it's fair to single anyone out," he said evenly. "My focus is on the work, not personalities or rumors. I've been fortunate to work with tremendously talented people." Denise laughed, a sharp cutting sound. "Oh, you're being so diplomatic. So boring, really. Our viewers want the dirt. What about that time on set? Someone had a tantrum, didn't they?" Hopkins's expression tightened. His voice stayed calm but carried an unmistakable edge. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," he said. "I came here to talk about my film, which I'm very proud of." "Perhaps we could discuss that?" The audience applauded, sensing the shift. But Denise only leaned back with a smirk. "Your film, right? We'll get to that. But first, let's talk about you. Some say you're difficult, a perfectionist, impossible even. What do you say to that?" Kay tried to interject. "Denise, maybe we should—" But Denise cut her off, hand raised. "No, I think this is important. We're journalists. We ask the tough questions." Hopkins folded his hands calmly. "With all due respect," he said, "you may have confused tough questions with being needlessly confrontational. I agreed to discuss my work. If that's not of interest, perhaps I'm in the wrong place." A hush fell, a few gasps. Denise's smile flickered before returning, brittle and forced. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," she said with a mocking laugh. "You actors can't handle a little straight talk." Janet leaned forward. "Denise, maybe we should let him speak about why he's here. We did invite him to talk about his film." Denise shot her a look. "Thank you, Janet, but I can handle this." She turned back to Hopkins. "So tell me about this new film. Another one of those serious dramas where you brood and look intense. Is that your brand now?" Hopkins inhaled slowly, refusing to be drawn in. "The film is a psychological thriller," he said. "It's about a man confronting his past, about memory, regret, redemption. It's some of my best work." "Memory and regret," Denise repeated mockingly. "Sounds thrilling. Don't you ever do anything fun anymore? Or is it all just doom and gloom with you?" Nadia cut in gently, her tone firm but kind. "I actually think it sounds fascinating," she said. "Anthony, what drew you to this story?" Hopkins turned to her, relief flickering across his face. Finally, a real question. "Thank you for asking," Hopkins said, turning to Nadia with a faint smile. "What drew me to the film was the complexity of the character. He's not a hero or a villain, just a man trying to make sense of his life. I think, in a way, we can all relate to that." "Very deep," Denise interrupted, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "But let's be real, Anthony. You're at a point in your career where you can do anything. Why not make something people actually want to see? A comedy, maybe. An action movie. Why always these depressing art house things?" The audience went quiet. The air in the studio thickened. Hopkins' jaw tightened. His eyes, calm but steely, locked on hers. "I make the films that interest me," he said slowly. "I'm not concerned with chasing trends or doing what's popular. I follow my instincts. As an artist." "Artist?" Denise scoffed. "That's a big word. Some people might say you're just being pretentious." That was the moment the temperature in the room changed. Kay Adams reached out, placing a hand on Denise's arm. "Denise, that's out of line." "Is it?" Denise shot back. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. He comes on here acting like he's above it all. Like he's too good for us." Hopkins stood up slowly and deliberately. He removed his microphone, folding the wire neatly in his hand. "I've been in this industry for over 50 years, he said, voice firm but composed. "I've done thousands of interviews. I've answered every kind of question imaginable. But I've never been spoken to with such blatant disrespect on what's supposed to be a professional program." Denise rose too, her face flushed with anger. "Disrespect? You're the one being disrespectful. You come on our show acting like you're doing us a favor." "I was invited," Hopkins said, his voice rising now, the weight of authority unmistakable. "I accepted in good faith, expecting a professional conversation. Instead, I've been ambushed by someone more interested in stirring conflict than discussing art." Janet Street Porter stood abruptly. "Anthony's right, Denise. This has gone too far. You've been needling him since he sat down." "Stay out of this, Janet," Denise snapped. "No, I won't," Janet fired back. "This is embarrassing. We invited a legendary actor onto our show, and you've spent the entire segment trying to humiliate him." Applause broke out from the audience, hesitant at first, then swelling into a wave of support. Denise glanced around, realizing the room was no longer with her. "I was just trying to have an honest conversation," she said defensively. "If he can't handle a few tough questions, maybe he shouldn't be doing interviews." "Tough questions?" Hopkins repeated, his voice low but cutting. "You haven't asked a single meaningful thing about my work. You've only tried to bait me for your own moment of drama." Nadia stood, walking toward him. "Anthony, I'm so sorry," she said softly. "This isn't how we usually conduct ourselves. Please, would you stay? We'd love to hear more about your film." Hopkins looked at her with genuine warmth. "I appreciate that, Nadia. Truly. But I think it's best if I leave." He turned to the audience. "You deserve better than this." The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, even a few shouts of, "We love you, Anthony," echoing through the studio. Denise looked around wildly, her composure gone. "Fine!" she shouted over the noise. "Leave then. Run away. That's what you do, isn't it? When things get real, you walk off." Hopkins stopped at the edge of the stage. Slowly, he turned back to face her. "Real," he said quietly. "You want to talk about real? Real is respect. Real is integrity. Real is doing your job without using your guests as props to feed your ego." Kay stepped between them, hands raised. "Everyone, please. Let's just take a breath." But Denise wasn't finished. "You think you're so much better than us, don't you?" she hissed. "You think this little daytime show is beneath you. You probably laughed when your agent said you had to come here." Hopkins shook his head, almost pitying her. "I didn't think that at all. I've been on many shows like this. I've always enjoyed them. The problem here," he paused, eyes fixed on her, "is you." The words hit like a thunderclap. gasps rippled through the audience. Nadia's hand flew to her mouth. Kay stared down at the desk. Janet's lips twitched, torn between shock and grim satisfaction. Denise's face turned crimson. She pointed at him, trembling with rage. "How dare you come onto my show and insult me like that?" "Your show?" Hopkins raised an eyebrow. "I was under the impression there were 4 hosts, not 1. But perhaps that's the issue. You seem to think everything revolves around you." Janet let out a sharp, involuntary laugh, quickly masking it with a cough. Denise spun toward her. "You think this is funny, Janet? You think it's amusing watching him attack me on live television? I think you brought this on yourself," Janet said flatly. "We all warned you, but you wouldn't listen." "Oh, so now you're all ganging up on me," Denise snapped, turning on the panel. "Unbelievable. I'm the only one trying to do my job here, asking the questions that matter." "Questions that matter," Kay finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Denise, you've been hostile from the moment Anthony sat down. You haven't asked him one thoughtful question about his film. You've just attacked him." "I haven't attacked anyone," Denise shot back, her voice cracking. "I'm trying to get past the rehearsed answers, the PR spin. I'm trying to get to the truth." Hopkins turned toward her one last time, his voice calm, almost sorrowful. "Then here's the truth," he said quietly. "You've mistaken cruelty for honesty." The room fell silent. Cameras still rolling, Denise frozen in place. Hopkins gave a slight nod to Nadia, then walked off the stage to a standing ovation. The applause followed him out the door. Denise laughed then, a sharp, brittle sound that made everyone on set flinch. "Help? That's rich." You all sat there while he lectured me, while the audience turned on me. And now you want to help? Her voice cracked, part fury, part despair. "You think I don't see what's happening? You're all just waiting for me to be the villain. For the headlines. For the clip. Denise." Janet began gently, but Denise cut her off. "No, don't Denise me. You've all been itching for this moment. The day I go too far. The day the audience finally gets what they want. A public breakdown." Hopkins stood still, watching her with quiet compassion. "This isn't a breakdown," he said softly. "It's a reckoning." The room went still again. Even the producer stopped moving. Denise blinked, her breath coming fast. "You think you're so wise, don't you? With your calm voice and your moral lessons. But you don't live here. You don't understand what it's like to survive in this chair, where every word you say can be turned against you." Hopkins nodded slowly. "You're right. I don't live here. But maybe that's why I can see what it's become. You started out wanting to have conversations, but somewhere along the way, it became about control, about winning, about humiliation." She stared at him, trembling. "And what would you know about humiliation?" Hopkins took a quiet breath. "Everything," he said simply. "Every rejection, every forgotten role, every time I was told I was too old, too slow, too strange. I know humiliation, Denise. But I never let it turn me cruel." The words seemed to hang in the air. Denise's defiance faltered, replaced by something smaller, more fragile. For a moment it looked like she might cry. But instead she laughed again, softer this time, almost to herself. "You think you've won," she murmured. "This wasn't a battle," Hopkins replied. "At least it didn't have to be." He turned toward the audience, then to Janet and Kay. "I think that's enough for today," the producer finally snapped out of her trance, signaling frantically. "Cut to commercial, cut to commercial." But before the cameras faded out, they caught one final image. Anthony Hopkins walking calmly off set, shoulders straight, dignity intact. Behind him, Denise stood motionless, surrounded by silence, her face unreadable under the blinding studio lights. And then slowly, a smile spread across her face. Not a friendly smile, a smile that said, "Game over." "He was gracious," Janet added. "Even when you were needling him, he kept his composure. That's more than I can say for how this went." Denise gave a small, incredulous laugh. Composure, please. He's an actor. That's what he does. Perform. And you all fell for it. Denise, Nadia said softly. Listen to yourself. I am listening. Denise snapped. I'm the only one telling the truth here. You're all too afraid to admit that these so-called legends come on this show expecting worship, not questions. They think they're untouchable. Kay leaned forward. No one is untouchable. But there's a difference between asking questions and trying to humiliate someone. You crossed that line, and now you're trying to justify it. The producer was whispering urgently again, waving for the cameras to cut. But the director still held. The tension was magnetic. Uncomfortable, combustible, impossible to look away from. Denise turned toward the audience, her eyes blazing. You all think I'm the villain here, don't you? Fine, go ahead. Boo, clap for the movie star. You'll forget this by tomorrow. But I'll be the one who gets crucified online. I'll be the headline. Host attacks national treasure. Her words hung in the air, bitter and trembling. Janet spoke carefully, her tone low and measured. Then maybe it's time to ask yourself why that's the headline, Denise. For a long moment, Denise said nothing. She looked around the studio, at the audience who'd turned against her, at her co-hosts watching her with pity, at the empty chair where Anthony Hopkins had sat just minutes before. Something in her expression shifted. The fury didn't vanish, but it cooled, condensed into something colder, sharper. You're all hypocrites, she said finally. Every single one of you. You talk about kindness and empathy, but the moment someone doesn't play nice, you all pounce. Maybe I am the villain, but at least I'm honest about it. Denise, Nadia started, but Denise raised a hand to silence her. No, don't. You've all made it very clear whose side you're on. She looked toward the camera, straight down the lens. Her eyes were glistening, but her voice was steady. You think you've just watched a meltdown? No, what you've seen is the truth. This industry doesn't reward honesty. It punishes it. Remember that. And with that, she pulled off her mic, set it down on the desk, and walked off the set. The studio was silent. No music, no applause. Just the faint hum of the lights above, and the producer's voice breaking through the headset feed. Cut to commercial now. But before the feed faded, the camera lingered one last second on the empty chair where Denise had sat, still slightly turned toward the audience, as if waiting for someone to defend her. No one did. He was patient. He answered your questions even when they were inappropriate, and he only pushed back when you went too far. The producer tried again, her voice trembling through the earpiece. Please, can we just cut to commercial? We can sort this out off air. No, Denise snapped. You want to make me the villain? You want to side with him? Then let's do this properly. Let's talk about what really happened here. She turned back to the audience, her voice loud and defiant. Anthony Hopkins came on this show because his publicist made him. He didn't want to be here. You could see it in his face. He thought he was too good for us. And when I dared to ask him real questions, when I dared to challenge him, he couldn't handle it. So he left. That's what happened. That's not what happened, Janet said, standing now, her composure gone. You know that's not true. You were rude to him. You belittled his work. You made it personal. And when he calmly defended himself, you escalated the situation. You did this, Denise. Not him. You. The audience erupted into applause. People were on their feet again, clapping for Janet. Denise looked around, her face a mix of disbelief and fury. You've all been brainwashed, she hissed. You've all bought into this celebrity worship culture. Someone famous can do no wrong. But someone like me, someone who actually speaks truth to power, gets crucified for it. This has nothing to do with celebrity worship, Nadia said, rising beside Janet. This has to do with basic decency. You were cruel to someone who didn't deserve it. That's all this is. Kay stood too, her expression tight but resolute. Denise, please. Take a breath and think about what just happened. Really think about it. Can you honestly say you treated him fairly? For the first time, Denise hesitated. Her eyes darted around the studio. The audience's hard stares, her colleagues' united front, the uneasy faces of crew members. The fight seemed to drain from her shoulders. "I was just trying to do something different," she said at last, her voice smaller, cracked. "I was tired of the same rehearsed interviews where everyone says the right thing. I wanted something real." "There are better ways to do that," Janet said softly but firmly. "You don't have to tear people down to make television compelling." Finally, the producer managed to cut through the chaos. "We need to wrap this up," she said to Janet. "Can you close it?" Janet nodded. The audience slowly settled back into their seats, the atmosphere thick with tension and shame. "Well," Janet began, her voice steady but tired. "This was certainly not the show we planned. We invited Sir Anthony Hopkins here to discuss his new film, and instead things took a very unfortunate turn. On behalf of Loose Women, I want to apologize to Sir Anthony for what happened today. He deserved far better than he received." Denise made a noise of protest, but Kay placed a gentle hand on her arm. Janet continued, "We hope that viewers will still go and see his film. By all accounts, it's a remarkable piece of work by a remarkable actor, and today's events do not reflect the respect we have for our guests," Nadia added quietly. "Anthony, if you're watching, please know we are truly sorry. You handled yourself with grace and dignity." Kay spoke next, and to our viewers, "Thank you for your patience during what's been a very difficult episode. We'll be back tomorrow, and hopefully return to the kind of honest, respectful conversations this show was built on." All three women looked to Denise, waiting. The silence stretched. The camera stayed on her. The audience waited, breath held. Finally, Denise spoke, her voice barely audible. "I may have come on too strong," she said. "That's all I'll say." It wasn't much of an apology, barely a concession, but it was clear it was all she could manage. Janet exhaled and turned back to camera. "We'll see you all tomorrow." "Take care of yourselves," the producer signaled cut. The studio lights dimmed. The audience began to file out, whispering and shaking their heads. The panelists sat in silence for a long moment before Denise finally stood, removed her mic, and walked off stage without looking at any of them. In the dressing rooms, Sir Anthony Hopkins was gathering his things. A young production assistant approached him nervously. "Mr. Hopkins, I just wanted to say how sorry we are about what happened. It was completely unprofessional." Hopkins smiled kindly. "Thank you. I appreciate that. These things happen. I just hope that young lady learned something from it." As he left, crew members nodded respectfully. Some even clapped quietly. He returned their gestures with a warm nod and walked out to his waiting car. As he settled into the back seat, his phone buzzed with messages from his agent, his publicist, and friends who'd already seen clips circulating online. He silenced it, gazing out at the passing city lights. The driver glanced up in the mirror. "Rough day, sir?" Hopkins smiled faintly. "You could say that. But I've had worse. Much worse. What happened in that studio would be talked about for weeks, months even. Clips would dominate social media. Think pieces would pour in. The confrontation would become a case study in how not to conduct an interview. And through it all, Sir Anthony Hopkins would remain silent, dignified, letting his calm, measured grace during the storm speak louder than anything he could ever say. Close.